an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Clariel, the Lost Abhorsen. Chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. Getting ready for school, Mistress Adder and the Academy, Tea and Arguments, and the education of a charter mage. In these chapters, Clariel doesn't like school. It appears that for the most part, school doesn't like her either. But I have to tell you guys, I was super duper here for this. I really, really enjoyed this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Yama for commissioning this episode. Yama is here in the chat. Hi, Yama. And Abby is also here. They're laughing because I was just ranting again about how urination is a ridiculous thing and doesn't make any sense, and I hate it. So these chapters, guys, y'all know how much I love me some logistics, okay? Basically, what it is that Clariel is in class for this first time around is like societal logistics, right? It's how do you know who to approach, how to introduce yourself, in what order you should introduce yourself, the ins and outs of the appropriate conversations, and the ways in which people determine who is worth talking to and who is not. There is so much here that I personally find fascinating, and I'm really curious to know whether or not anybody else loves this as much as me, or if it's just that I'm a giant nerd and other people were like, where are the monsters? I want to see the monsters, you know? I honestly, this is all I want. I would be happy to essentially take this class. Like, I'm not even kidding. I want to know all of it. So let's back it up. Let's do chapter 4. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and even more detestable to Clariel than ever. The sunlight seemed to penetrate everywhere, accompanied by the dull, ever-present noise of the city, and there was no quiet, cool place to hide, no forest glade to shelter in. So, I just want to know so much, is Clariel a, wood nymph? Is she half dwarf? Because she seems to genuinely have her power sapped by the city in a way that feels extremely literal. And I am just, I don't know. It's the title of the book is Clariel, the Lost Abhorsen, which makes it seem that Clariel is herself the Lost Abhorsen. But that doesn't feel right. I don't know that she is. It might be somebody else and she winds up helping to find them or something. Maybe her school buddy, whose name I'm forgetting, and I promise I will figure out, maybe he's the one. But there is something about her need for the solitude and the earth that feels almost supernatural, like it's a literal need. But anyway, so she's getting ready for school. Villani is the one that is telling her how to wear her clothes, how to do her hair. And Villani is okay, so I'm going to say this, and this might be untrue, but I feel like Villani is way smarter than Clariel gives her credit for. I feel like Villani, maybe she is a bit of a snob. That might be. But I think that she is actually pretty fucking... There's a sort of like assumption I think Clariel is making, which is that if Vellani cares about society and bows to the demands of society all the time, that is due to some sort of foolishness on her part. I do not subscribe to that notion. I am more of a Sansa Stark in that I think there is something deeply important about the expectations of society that can be turned to your advantage should you choose to understand it well enough to do that. Does that make sense? So essentially, what I feel is Clariel keeps dismissing some things out of hand as being inherently unimportant because she does not really, she cannot put herself in the shoes of the people who do find those things important. And that is the key to getting along with people who have different values than you. And that's not to say people who believe that certain human rights should be taken away or that certain people are less human than other people. I'm talking about people who are, maybe they are of a different religion and something in that religion is very important to them. And for you, it is not at all. And you find it really weird that for them, this is so important. But all you have to do is think to yourself, okay, but if I were them and I believed what they believed, does this make sense? And that takes a certain kind of empathy. Clariel is a little bit self-centered, and she doesn't really have that empathy yet. Or if she does, she isn't exercising it. She isn't making an effort to access that part of the values of strangers around her in this new place. Because all Clariel wants to do is not be here. That's it. She just doesn't want to be here. She wants to go somewhere else, be somewhere else, live somehow else. And it is really frustrating when you watch somebody her age doing this because you're like, oh man, you can make life so much easier for yourself. You really could. If you just if you just handled this a little differently and listened to what people are saying to you, all the things that you claim to want, you might be able to get way sooner, but you are unwilling to work with anybody. So, and that is something that I think takes time to learn as an adult. Some people learn it much earlier than others. And there's also, the danger. And this is one of those things that's there is a balance between being empathetic to what somebody wants and understanding their values are different than yours and finding ways to make that advantageous. That's one thing. And then there is pretending to believe in the same things as them so as to manipulate them into giving you what you want. That's not those aren't the same. I think she could do the former. And I think, for example, the governor's son is doing the latter, perhaps. Either way, I feel like it's really frustrating to poor Vellani, who really is doing her best to try to show Clariel ways to make her own life easier. All she's trying to do is give her the tools to get through these days in this place she doesn't like with minimal friction. And Clariel just is not respecting it at all and is treating it all as really vapid and silly. And it's well, maybe it is vapid and silly, but guess where you live now? Someplace vapid and silly. So you're going to have to kind of figure it out, friend. You wouldn't take the attitude of this if you were going from the woods to the ocean, right? You would understand that you have to adjust the way that you behave when you're on a ship as opposed to being in the woods. You're in a city, you're amongst society, you just gotta figure it out. She just doesn't want to do that. Abby says, though I'm very much with Clariel when it comes to all this dressing in the right clothes and introducing yourself in the right order stuff. Listen, I don't... This is like... Honestly, it's one of those things that is so frustrating for me personally, because really, the whole first class that she has is about how to have small talk with people that are not your friends. And that is my idea of hell. At the same time, I have always been really good at small talk. I hate it. I hate it so much. It's so, it's excruciating. But I've always been excellent at it. And so any job that I have had, when they had to have somebody go deal with a customer, it was always fucking me every time. I just know how to humor people. I know how to get along, and it's really tedious and boring to do, but it is a skill, I guess. It's just one of those skills that you don't realize you have it until you watch somebody who doesn't have it. And then you're like, oh, sweetie, why did you say that? Why are you looking at them like that? Why is your posture this way? You can see somebody who does not know what they're doing, and you realize all of a sudden that oh God, they really don't know. And that's where Clariel's at. She doesn't understand. She doesn't care. She doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to hide from anybody that she doesn't want to do this. She isn't interested in making things easier for herself. In fact, she kind of considers it a badge of honor if it's not easy. I think that if it were easy, she would feel like she had given in. This is her sort of, I guess, finding an identity for herself in some ways in not fitting in here. And that's valid. I get that. Anyway, so, may I suggest, my lady, that at the academy it would be well to smile and to talk with the other young folk. Why? Asked Clariel. I have no interest in them. I consider this academy a mere duty, and a dull one. It will be easier for you, milady, to make a pretense of interest. A smile, a simple question, these ease the way with people. To what end? Asked Clariel. To make friends, said Villani, with a smile that Clariel found very condescending. Surely you wish to find some new friends here, milady. I have friends in the forest and in Estwell, said Clariel. I will rejoin them soon enough. But then she stops and thinks about it, and she's realizing, I kind of don't have friends, actually. And it's an interesting thing because it could easily be that she realizes that she doesn't have friends, but she doesn't feel bad about it. Because I feel like a lot of authors would go in the direction of her thinking about how she doesn't have friends, not real friends, and then be a little bit like, oh, actually, I don't. I mischaracterize what my life is like there. Maybe I do want friends. But it doesn't go that way. She thinks about the women that she befriends. There's first Aunt Lemon, but they don't really talk. There's Sergeant Penrith, a tough, silent woman who had let her trail along and learn by observation, but she didn't talk much. Clariel had never felt the need to smile at her or make conversation. Childhood friends, of course, but she hadn't kept in touch with them save to say hello. She had never felt the need for friends, but she had also never felt alone. But that was when she lived in the forest, and the forest made her feel full, like she didn't need anything else. And here she realizes things are different, and maybe she should make some friends. So she starts to kind of, and I really was like, oh, well, maybe that's a good sign. But it doesn't really, she's still not real receptive to this. What should I talk about? About clothes, of course, and at the moment, comical songs are very fashionable. The minstrels who excel at this are in great demand, as is Yarlo the balladeer, who writes such sly verses. Oh, and always betrothals and weddings and the alliances of the guilds, and in some quarters among the more sober, the course of business, the price of grain, and such like, though I expect that this is more for the older students. Clariel is just like, I guess I can talk about grain. I don't really want to talk about clothes. And Vellani, she says something about, I could talk about business and the way it's done in Estwell. And Vellani is like, whoa, no, don't do that. Don't talk about the country. Why would you even do this? And Clariel gets very defensive of Estwell. And Vellani is just like, oh my God, please don't. No, seriously, it will just fuck you up. Don't do it. And Clariel notices that Vellani isn't just like being condescending this time around. It says that her pleading seemed very sincere. So perhaps it would be sensible to follow the maid's advice. Ah, thank God. Thank you, Clariel. Like, again, she doesn't really follow the instructions the way she should and the way that I think would have worked best for her. However, I do appreciate these little moments of her just like caving a tiny bit and agreeing to listen to somebody else's wisdom at least a little. So she asks about the best people that they will be wanting to meet her. Should I mention that my grandfather is the Abhorsen, or the king my mother's cousin? Perhaps not unless it is brought up first, milady, Vellani said cautiously. Why? Politics. That's for your elders. I wish to know. If you will not tell me, I shall ask at the academy. I shall ask everyone I meet. Okay. First real smart thing she's done. Oh, okay. You don't want to give me this information? I will embarrass the hell out of you. So she says, I will tell you, but you can't let anybody know it was me that gave you this information. The king has gone mad some years ago. He stopped ruling. He lets no one enter the palace for any serious matter, only if it be for one of the old rituals, and then only upon rare occasions. He will not hear his officers. He will not read letters or petitions. He will not sit in the petty or the greater court, or sign or seal any document of state. He dismissed most of the guard, keeping only 2 scores, so that the city was left bereft of soldiery and order till the governor and the guilds stepped in. There was trouble with lawless folk, and the commoners who had ever caused trouble against the guilds, and the king to blame for it all. Now no one knows what is to come, for he does not abdicate, and the Princess Tathiel is who knows where, and all must fall upon the shoulders of Governor Kilp and the high guilds. Oh, I see. Is this also why charter magic is frowned upon? Because the king is part of the charter? Oh, no. Magic has been ever so unfashionable for years. It's so tedious to learn, all that time memorizing marks. Best left to those who have the time to waste on learning it all, I say. So, she says something, too, about how, like, if you get a mark wrong, it'll backfire on you and make your hair light on fire or your eyes bulge out of your head. And Clariel's like, okay, that's not true, but I guess I'll just let that slide. I liked that a lot because that's one of those things where, like, you're talking to somebody who doesn't really get something. And, like, yeah, if you get something wrong, things might not go the way you intend, but they are just kind of mischaracterizing a thing. And yet you're just like, you know what? I'm not even going to get into this with you. Like, this is like somebody talking to me about cooking. And they'll use like the wrong word to describe something. And I'm just like, actually, it's braise. Okay, you know what? Never mind. It's fine. Call it boiling. Whatever. And the Abhorsens, they are seen as allies of the king who has caused such trouble to the city folk? No, the Abhorsens rarely come here. I doubt anyone thinks much of their connection with the king. I don't want to speak ill of your relations, but as Yarlo said in that ballad, they get rid of unwanted things. They're really rather like rat catchers or even night rakers. Enough, snapped Clariel. That is even more stupid than being too lazy to learn magic. It is what everyone says, milady. You better make sure my mother doesn't hear it, said Clariel forcefully. And then she's sort of like, I wonder if my mom would even be mad, or maybe she already knows that that's how it is, you know? And this is an interesting thing. Jassiel was estranged from her father, the Abhorsen Tyrael, and the whole clan who lived somewhere to the south in a sprawling house or series of houses collectively called Hillfair. The reason or reasons for that estrangement had never been explained to Clariel. She'd never asked about them either, and in fact hadn't really ever even thought about it. Maybe Jassiel felt so badly towards the rest of the Abhorsen family she wouldn't mind them being called rat catchers or night rakers. And night rakers, by the way, are the ones who handle, like, the sewer work. Villani was saying something about never speaking so in front of Jassiel, but Clariel ignored her as she was suddenly struck by the question, what had made Jassiel separate from her parents? And I have all kinds of thoughts about all of this. So Yama is in the chat saying, how is magic tedious? I gotta tell you guys something. As far as conceits in a fantasy setting, the idea that magic is something nobody does because it's tedious and unfashionable, I love it so much. It feels like the kind of sort of snapback that we have to technology nowadays, where we have shit that can do anything. We have computers and screens everywhere. We have stuff that can automatically calculate with algorithms and figure out anything. But then there is this like deep desire in a lot of us to do things in an analog way for the sake of, and is it more efficient? No. Is it actually better? No. But for whatever reason, we feel drawn to writing with like quill pens and still using sealing wax to seal letters. And those are considered fancy, even though the stuff on computers takes more, in many ways, more knowledge, more equipment, more advanced technology. Think about getting a paper invite in the mail, sealed with wax, drawn with like calligraphy in gold ink, versus getting a Facebook invite to a thing. And that's sort of that's sort of how I'm seeing this, is that magic can do all kinds of shit and it's really cool and whatever, but there's something about it that's like gauche because it's so easy. And I don't mean easy because obviously they're talking about like the studying of it is the thing that is really, really tedious. So it would be like if it fell out of fashion entirely to use computers for anything at all. And it would, like, for us now, it doesn't really make sense, but I can absolutely see in the next 10 years or so a like sort of return to analog handling of a lot of things, simply because it's the way that we work as a society is we tend to like adopt something and embrace it, and then we'll sort of begin to reject it. So that's what's going on with like social media. It was just took over completely. And now there are a lot of people who are taking very strategic steps back from it, who don't want to be part of it anymore. And I mean, can't you just see like Brooklynites just all deciding all of a sudden that they want to go back to flip phones? All of a sudden it's just a thing that's like really stylish is to not have a smartphone anymore because you're like too plugged in, man. Just like, you know what? That stuff, they're tracking you. Just like get out of there. I could absolutely see that. So that's the way that I'm sort of seeing this. And it's just such a dope take because everything that you read, everybody wants magic. Everybody thinks magic's cool. Everybody thinks magic can solve all their problems. Everybody thinks they can do magic even if they really can't. Everybody admires and wants to have some sort of magical ability. It is sought after and it is considered something to aspire to. So here he's created a society in which the opposite is kind of true. And we know from reading the other books that magic is fucking key in this like universe. But to have it set up so that society looks down on it, very unusual. Not something that I feel like I've ever even seen before. There has been magic that has been outlawed You know, there's plenty of stories you read where like magic is not allowed for whatever reason. If you use magic, then you're seen as a witch or you're seen as a demon or whatever. That's different though. It's not simply seen as like kind of lame. It's not seen as something servants do. That element of it being outlawed adds danger to it. It adds excitement. This is totally different. This is like just, oh God, she's magic. Oh, I was going to invite her to my birth. You know what? I don't think I'm going to let her know, actually. She's just going to be weird about it. Like, this is such a wild tact to take with this. I'm just super, super interested in this. So let's see. Yama says, I see what you're saying, but like computers are a tool for us. Amazing, but I don't really know how it works. Magic is your own superpower. You yourself can do things out of thin air, but you have to go into the charter to get it, Yama. Like, and this is what I find really, this book so far for me has so many advantages over the previous books because specifically of the explaining to me of how charter magic works. And it's not even like it's really explained, but I feel like in these chapters, I get it more than I ever did in like the previous, 3 books. The charter is like the fucking data bank of magic, and you reach in and pull the code out that you need. It's not even like your magic is coming from within you. Like in Dresden Files, you have your will and you decide what you want and formulate a totally different spell to accomplish the same thing as somebody else might choose. So if you want to light candles, you might say a totally different thing. You could have a totally different sort of intent in your mind as you do it, but you still just light a candle. And so does that other person. You just did it differently because you're different human beings with different minds and souls. In this, there is a symbol. You reach out and get the mark for XYZ. It is a standardized thing in a fucking server that is attached to your fucking head, which is just, I don't think I ever quite understood. I started talking about that in one of the previous chapters of, I think it was in Abhorsen, but the description here of like the way that worked, it felt like it clicked for me much more than before. So that it makes sense too, why learning magic is seen as tedious, because it's like coding, which I mean, I don't fucking want to learn that either. You know, thank you very much. If there was a way for this magic to function as I will code you a thing and you can just input your information and it works like a website. I will create the site, a magical construct that you can just use. Then maybe it would be like, okay, this is fine because a servant has created that. But you can't do that. That's not how magic works here. You can create a construct and leave it and it will like do things on your behalf. But a person can't personalize what that construct does for them. You have control over that whole thing. So I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I really, really like this. And I find it such a weird sort of like subversion of my expectations. And I'm just here for it. I'm really interested. So the bells begin to ring. Volania's like, we really need to go. Oh my God, we're super late. We haven't painted your face. And Clariel starts to be like, but nobody paints their faces. And then she's like, oh, fine. Okay. They have to do this thing. 40 minutes later, her eyes wider than they had been, her lips much more red, her forehead charter mark almost invisible under something skin colored that Volani had painted on very thick so it felt unpleasantly like a scab. Clariel was walking up the broad steps that led to what she was told was a viewing garden. So it's like so unfashionable that even charter marks are like hidden on purpose, which is just bonkers. So here comes something that I fucking loved so much. Clariel meets Mistress Adder. And Mistress Adder, Clariel really, really expects, and so did I, that she's going to go talk to this woman, and that woman's going to be like, No. Get married, have babies, shut the fuck up. She really just expects this person to have one single objective for all female students, and any deviance from that will be seen as unacceptable. And it is really startling to Clariel when she talks to this woman, and not only is she not met with outright resistance when she shares the things that she wants to do, but this woman knows more information about each of the suggestions Clariel makes than she ever expected. So yeah, Adder, it's pronounced Ader, but I think I like Adder, so I'm just going to say Adder because she just sounds like, I don't know. As a snake is cool, and she sounds cool. So she says, welcome. We're delighted you can attend. Villani, you have done well. Lady Clariel is presented adequately. You may join the other maids in the paneled chamber until you are summoned. Now, stand straight, Lady Clariel, and we shall talk. Do you wish to be married soon? No? Many of the ladies here do, and if that's so, they have more lessons concerned with the supervision of a household, selection of a doctor, on childbirth, on setting up a nursery, and so forth. I, again, find this fascinating. We are so different now with the way that we approach education, that to see an education that is very focused on actually equipping you to go out into the world and live your life versus the kinds of sort of hypotheticals that we teach now that we hope will come in handy eventually. Really, math is totally necessary, but we don't teach the kinds of math oftentimes that are crucial. We teach that initially, but we don't teach the implementation of it. And then we move on to fucking geometry and algebra and calculus, which a lot of us don't wind up using. And other than that, there's history, which is usually not taught truthfully. We have language arts, which I think is an incredibly useful subject that is often taught in the most boring possible way, so as to just make you want to throw yourself out a window. The idea of teaching kids about how to run a household, the things that are involved with that. How cool would that be if there was a class in which, all right, we're going to lead you through reading a rental contract. We're going to lead you through signing a mortgage. We're going to talk to you about, well, okay, now you have to get your utilities hooked up. How does that work? Who do you call? What kind of rates do you think are appropriate to pay? What other utilities that are not included here do you think are going to be necessary? Your water heater broke. Now what? Boring? Yes. Useful? Also yes. That would be kind of helpful. But no, we don't do that. So Clariel says that she doesn't want to marry and that she doesn't want anybody else. And Mr. Adder says very few people need no one else. I mean, I don't need to be with someone, married or tied down. Marriage need not be a shackling together of the unwilling, but it is not impossible that you are a natural singleton. I love it. Guys, immediately she's like, I'm going to point out that you have some flawed thinking here. However, I'll grant you that this happens, and maybe that's who you are. All right. And she doesn't really fight her on it at all. And then I love this. You do not wish to follow in your parents' footsteps, or is it that you have no ability? There appeared to be no insult in Adder's voice, just calm curiosity. Clariel felt as if she was an object being weighed up and examined, and once identified to be put in the appropriate place, just as she herself had often sorted coins by type and weight and mint and placed them in the correct niche within the great chest in her father's office. And finally, Clariel says, no trade. I do not wish to be apprenticed. Do you wish to become a guard? No, I can fight if need be. What do you wish to follow? I want to join the borderers to live in the great forest. One painted eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch, but there was no other obvious reaction and no immediate outpouring of derision. Curious, said Ada at last. I keep pronouncing her name differently. All right, I'm just going to say Ada. Perhaps I begin to understand more of your desire to be solitary. In the right place, said Clariel, the forest. Your parents, I presume, do not support you in this ambition. No. I am not overly familiar with the organization of the borderers. Their chief house is near Halfmet, is it not? Yes, said Clariel, surprised that Ada even knew that. The forest fort called Greenstilts was only a few leagues from the town of Halfmet, and it was there that the borderers' senior officers dwelled, the stores and records kept, a hospital maintained, and most important as far as Clariel was concerned, recruits were trained. But they do not take in anyone who has not already been a forester, wood warden, or such like for some years. 5 years, if I remember aright. But I have worked as such off and on since I was 13. And she tries to say that if I could get a chance to just show them what I can do, they might make an exception for me, is essentially what she's saying. And Ada's like, no, I don't think so. And I love that Clariel tries to argue, and Ada just says stop, and then continues talking. Oh, this woman is such a fucking boss. It is not simply a matter of your skills. While it is very unlikely the borderers would enlist someone so young in normal times, they simply could not enlist you now, no matter if you were a half-beast yourself and the finest hunter ever seen. Clariel opened her mouth to ask why not, but Ada held up one forceful finger and continued to speak. They could not, because like all the royal institutions, they have no money and their future is in doubt. In fact, if the king does not reassume his authority, or if the guilds do not take over the borderers as they have done the royal guard and the wall garrison, then the borderers must eventually be disbanded when they run out of whatever funds they still possess. But that would be madness. It needs constant attention, lest it run totally wild. Madness is, unfortunately, not incompatible with government, said Ada. That's the truest statement ever stated, ever. I loved it. She's so good. So then she's like, so what else do you want to do? Because I don't think so. And Clariel is sitting there like all she can think is, I'll just get them the money. I'll figure it out. But she realizes that is not an adequate response right now. And Clariel says, I can still be a hunter and guide people and take them hunting. And Ada's like, yeah, all right. Like, that'd be a tough thing to do, and you're pretty young, but that's actually probably doable. And Clariel can't help at this point but to just be like, really? Oh my God. I thought that you were just going to like turn me down. And Ada's like, you thought we limit the choices of our students? We do not. But it is a sad fact that the great majority limit themselves. You might find it best to keep your ambitions secret, Lady Clariel. Many here would consider it too small, a thing to be made fun of. However, all I am concerned with is that we equip you both for the possibility of other futures and for the one you yourself envisage. So she fixes up all of the classwork that she needs to do, gives her the list of the curriculum and the lessons that she will be starting. Your immediate class is in the 3-window room. And after your lesson today, I suggest you walk around and learn the names of locations of all the rooms. There are only 19. And then we get the list of all of these classes. Writing of letters, partners in business, music and dancing, roles in households, direction of feast celebration, festivals and fairs, the serving of tea, and that's the one that stops Clariel. And we find out that tea is actually not like much of a thing here. This is something sort of new. And she's like, how is that something that anybody cares about? And Mistress Ada just says, go find out. And And she says, I understand you are to study charter magic. It is a good thing for one of your heritage to study, as ignorance of it may prove fatal. Please pass on a message from me to Magister Cargrin when you see him this afternoon. Tell him I said, none have yet passed through, but I shall keep watch. So, yeah, that is... I am curious what this means. I am assuming she's keeping an eye on something that's trying to like come out of death, but not necessarily. Because when she says pass through, I keep thinking of like a portal or something. But that might not be what she means at all. But obviously something is up. And there is something up with the king as well. I don't know if, like, because the prologue, we have a man being, like, basically possessed by this, like, creature in a bottle. It is unclear how much time passed from the prologue to the start of this, but that feels to me like it feels like maybe that had something to do with the king's madness. Maybe. I don't know. It's really hard to know with the timing. So she goes to class, and I'm going to kind of like, because I only have a little over 15 minutes left. I'm going to kind of hurry this a little bit. She goes into class, and Dyrel is the teacher here. Dyrel is extremely concerned about everything being done according to propriety. He wants to have the introductions immediately done. He is using the entire class as a means of showing them how to interact with one another, rather than letting them be casual in class, but then taking on the affectations of being amongst society. As far as he is concerned, once they walk through that door, they are meant to behave as if they are at some sort of formal dinner. And the fact that they do not see it that way or treat it that way irritates the fuck out of him so continually. It is so funny. So Clariel comes in, and Dyrel is like, okay, introduce yourself. She starts to introduce herself to just him and then continue on into the room. And he's like, no, you have to tell everybody. And she is like, why? I really don't want to do this. And he says, if you figure this out and do it correctly, you won't be embarrassed anywhere. And she's like, I don't get embarrassed. I don't really care. And he finally interrupts and says, come on, I don't want to send you back to Mistress Ader. And that is the one thing that makes Clariel be like, oh, okay. Like, I love that. She doesn't dislike Mistress Ader. You don't feel that at all. She just respects the hell out of her and knows that she is not somebody to fuck with. And so doesn't want to be on the receiving end of a reprimand from that woman. So, I don't believe we met, said the man with a smile that was nearly a smirk and very annoyingly the shadow of a wink. This is the kid that pretended to try and stab her on the street. I am Aranzo, son of Kilp, guildmaster of the High Goldsmiths and governor of Belisaere, and his consort Margit. And then somebody steps in and is like, I think I should have precedence even over high goldsmiths. And there is a young man, very pale, very dark hair, skin rather too white to look healthy. He wore simpler clothes than Aranzo, dark blue on top with dull silver stripes showing through the cuts in his sleeves, with no other indicator save a small silver badge of a single key high on his left arm, so unobtrusive Clariel almost missed it. Being the Abhorson's great-nephew, Ratcatcher, said Aranzo, making it sound enough like a sneeze for Dyrel to be able to ignore him, though like everyone else present he must have heard it. And a cousin of the king, continued the pale young man, ignoring the interruption. Yes, yes, we have been over this, said Tyrell testily. This is not the old times. And in the modern age, certainly for the last very many years, it has been the custom in the city for guild rank to take precedence, save in some of the old ceremonies. And I really enjoy this, like, because I thought that he was genuinely making a point, but as soon as Tyrell says, no, that's not how it's going, the kid sort of says, I'm just showing my cousin how things are, and bows to Clariel. And I really enjoy this. So he says that his name is Belisaere, and as we are kinfolk, please call me Bel. As I am not of the guild, I'm a nuisance, and they never know quite what to do with me. And I really enjoyed him immediately reaching out to her. I don't know if Bel is a good kid or not. I get the good vibe off him, but who knows? I just enjoy that somebody is making an effort to connect with Clariel, and that they are doing so while sort of undermining this system as well, because I feel like that is the surest way to her heart. The best way to make her trust you is by making it clear you don't really buy into this bullshit. So then they have this like whole scene where they are forced to like talk about the weather. It is hilarious. I love this so much. They have to go and sit down and choose like where to sit in order of precedence. And this is when Bel says, I'm going to light one of the candles, and he begins to sketch a charter mark at the top of the wick to light it. And Tyrell yells, no, only servants use magic. And Clariel is like, come on. I didn't think that was even really true. Are you serious? But yeah, they have to just use the matches, which they're calling yellow-headed friction lights. So here comes the tea ceremony and the pouring of it and everything. It's all very intricate. I am fascinated by this stuff. I don't like... This is something that I know is a genuine thing. The pouring of and serving of tea. And this is true. It began in Asia, but in England as well, it became this like huge ceremony. But Tyrell says, simply pour for someone who has not yet received a cup. And when you are poured for, do not drink. Because she doesn't drink tea. So just don't drink it. But somebody pours it for you anyway. So she goes through and, there's this moment where she notices that this girl, Denema, is kind of got her eye on Bel, and that Bel is sort of grinning back at her. Bel and Denema certainly seemed friendly, but Clariel couldn't tell whether they were amused at her or at the stupidity of this tea business. She similarly couldn't tell whether the hostility between Bel and Aranzo was real, or some kind of playfulness between two old friends, or at least old acquaintances. All in all, it made her feel tired. Which, you know what? I get that. For me, I find this stuff compelling. I love reading body language. I love trying to figure out the relationships between people. But if this is not something that is in your wheelhouse, it is tiring. And I really do understand how this could just be like, oh, just tell me what to think about you. Stop making me figure it out. So they talk about weather. It is so fucking stilted and awkward. Oh, God. They talk about going along with the rigmarole at one point because Tyrell leaves the room, and Aranzo says, I don't lack for sense. There are advantages to having our elders think well of me. So at this point, Clariel really tries to like get him into a corner and explain why he attacked her yesterday. And there's this girl that's kind of into Aranzo. What is her name? Which one is she? Is she Yanim? Yanim, that's the one. So here it is. This is the part I thought that was so funny. She asks about him attacking her. Yanim tries to interrupt and be like, we shouldn't be talking about this. He could come back at any moment. Everybody is like, shut up. They don't even like acknowledge her. He tells her, Father wanted an excuse to warn some of the weavers and tailors who'd been talking trouble. I merely volunteered to help out, and you happen to be a convenient target. Why? Asked Yanim with a sniff that suggested no one would want to look at Clariel at any time, particularly not if they had her to look at instead. Sometimes one wants to see something new, said Aranzo with a sigh. Yanim colored and pursed her lips while Denema and Belisaere exchanged a swift glance. Clariel noted all this and inwardly sighed, though she was careful to show no outward emotion. Back home in Estwell, she had avoided becoming involved or even necessarily knowing about all the complicated romantic entanglements of her former school fellows, simply by not being around. So then we get a little reminder at the fact that she is just not interested in anybody in that way. But she can see that Yanim is, and that her and Aranzo were probably sleeping together, but that Yanim considered the relationship to be more important than Aranzo did. So he continues kind of flirting with her. At one point he tries to ask her to come over, and she declines and says that she's going to be busy every single time that he will ever ask her to come over. She will be busy. He insinuates at one point that Clariel's mom and his dad are sleeping together, and she breaks a cup in her rage and very nearly wants to slash his neck with the shards of the broken cup. And then that's quickly followed up by horror at the fact that she even reacted that way and that it entered her head to do that at all. To which I'm like, yeah, girl, I feel you on the rage issues. Don't get me wrong. But also, you want to cut his throat because he's just fucking with you a little bit. He's really not even pushing that hard, and it took nothing. You need to get yourself a little bit more under control, my friend. So Yanim keeps on trying to they're asking where she's from. She says Estwell. Yanim's I'm not even sure where that is. Do you know, Aranzo? Of course I do, said Aranzo. Haven't you ever looked at a map? Yanim flushed again and was silent. Oh, Yanim, sweetheart, don't do this. It's so transparent and you're just embarrassing yourself. Just back away. Just don't even try. It's so much more effective behaving as if you don't care. It really is. But whatever. This is a real Pansy Parkinson Malfoy kind of thing. So yeah. Finally, she says something about his father wiping his ass for him, and Aranzo gets real red in the face and sort of lunges at her, but she pulls a dagger and backs away from him, and the two of them have this sort of face off, and Denema is okay guys, how about you all fucking chill out? Clariel, put your fucking knife away, you psycho. And Aranzo, sit the fuck down. So they managed to do that and keep things calm enough that when Diro comes back, it looks like they have just been mildly misbehaving. He freaks out about the cup being broken, but that's about, as difficult as they appeared to have been. So they go on to their next classes. And Clariel, is it Belatiel or Belisaere? I kind of like Belisaere, but, let's just call him Bell. Let's just do Bell. Bell and Denema, sort of pair up with her and are talking with her about the plans and going to see the king, because she mentions having to go find a colorful fish. And they're all really surprised that she was able to get an audience. They don't understand how, this is just not something that people have been managing to do. And Clariel is like, well, Mom seems to think that we're going to get in. I don't know. And I love this. She looks down at her shoes and then realizes that she's doing the exact thing her father does. And she immediately like jerks her head back up and notices that both them, Denema and Belle, have charter marks on their heads that Aranzo and Yanim both don't have. And that makes sense that they're sort of like, you know, gravitating towards each other because of this. It just feels right. So, does it really matter who rules the city or the kingdom? Perhaps it doesn't so much who actually rules. But the royal family don't just govern the kingdom, they also embody part of the charter and are charged with its preservation, which begs the question who or what also gains if the king is overthrown. So then we get the final chapter of this section. Is it the final one or is it? I think it might be. Yeah, it is. The education of a charter mage. Oh, Yama has to go. I'm sorry, Yama. Clariel gets brought to her next class and she is like, Belle asks for her to wait when she's done with the class before and talk to him. But she is so overwhelmed with this like need to get out of this stone building by the time class ends that she kind of flees, is really the vibe that I get from here. It's just like her running the hell up out of there. And it's sort of a shame because like she has the class that she has before the magic class. She actually rather enjoys. Mistress Gerlin is the person who is running the class. She is, intelligent and direct and really like focused in the way that she teaches. And it suits Clariel immensely. However, it's like the surroundings of being in this building is just completely, it's intolerable. Denema half raised her hand as if to call her back, but Clariel didn't even notice. She needed to get out under the sun again, away from the weight of stone and the smothering attention of other people. In her urge to escape the confines of the house, she also forgot that Belle had asked her to wait. So she goes out there, her guard is there. Obviously, Villani didn't expect for her to like flee quite so quickly, and so she catches up with them a moment later. And Clariel says, I would like to go to my charter magic class. And Villani is immediately like, girl, can you just keep your voice down? Oh my God, please don't make it so, come on. And Villani wants her to stay and have lunch with the other students. And obviously is looking for her mistress to be a credit to her. She wants Clariel to attempt to be social and like, not happening. Not happening, sister. So they head over to this class, and it's in another whole part of the city. And the building is really old, and it's very clear that Villani does not think much of it. It's like, very old architecture that isn't done anymore. But the fact that Clariel says that she likes it makes Villani just like irritated, and I just found this funny. So they go in, and I'm over time, but what are you going to do? They go in, and there's this dude with a fucking rat in his arms. And it turns out later, it's a charter rat. It's ascending. But initially, it just looks like he's cradling this huge rat. And I'm just like, what are you doing? And Villani is obviously super duper uncomfortable with this guy altogether. She tries to say that she's going to stay and hang, like, to keep an eye on her charge. But he uses ascending to sort of like freak her out and make her a little bit uncomfortable. And then says, Amda will show you out. Villani's mouth moved, but only a kind of strangled clucking sound came out. And Kargrin says that Clariel will address him as Magister, and he wants to test out what she knows about charter magic. she clarifies that she's not really interested. Her parents want her to learn. And he's like, all right, well, let's see what you can do. They do the greeting of touching each other's marks, which is something that Clariel has like not even ever seen done. This is a really ancient thing. And, oh wait, no. She had not seen anyone perform this traditional greeting since she had come to Belisaere. Oh, okay. No, it's just way more... So I guess they must have done it back where she's from, in the country. I'm assuming then. So this isn't completely gone. It's just not done here. Okay. I misunderstood that. I thought that this was like way like just not really done at all anymore, but it's simply not done here. Okay. Got it. And this is when she like has this moment of feeling like she's part of the charter and being kind of taken aback by the immensity of it. He asks her to light a candle, and it's a little difficult. It takes some like a couple of seconds, and it goes out right away. The light like flares up and then disappears. And she realizes that she's like sweating. And then he starts to like throw shards of metal at her to attack her. And he's telling her to use the charter to defend herself. And she does not know how to do that. So she's using her fighting skills and then begins to like get into her rage. And it is like really ugly. She's fucking going all over the place. She swarmed up the wall, her fingers thrust into the tiniest cracks between stones, dislodging ancient mortar, but even so she could not find hand and footholds. She fell back, immediately circling to find a weapon, something to throw at the enemy above her. But even as her hands closed upon a fallen piece of stone, a glowing net of charter marks fell on her from above, wrapped itself around her 3 times, and bound her as securely as a spider ever tied a fly. She thrashed around enough to bruise herself even more, and perhaps would even have dashed out her own brains on the floor if Kargren had not dropped lightly by her and laid a spell for sleep upon her brow. Woo! This bitch has issues. I love it. I kind of think that it might be the fact that she doesn't use the magic that's in her that's making her like so ragey, but I don't know. So I really have to wrap because I have to go and get a brain scan for my facial twitch. So I better run, but I am really, really, really excited about this book. This has been super fun. This is just like scratching an itch I didn't even know I had, you know? So thank you very much to Yama for commissioning it for me. I am super duper excited to keep reading, and I will see you all again soon with a new episode. Till then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.